The Galactic Empire had made the announcement with its usual fanfare, grand, ostentatious, and dripping with the smug confidence of a regime that had never once been challenged in its dominance. Across the known universe, the message broadcast in 1,000 languages, a decree carved in arrogance and sent spiraling across the stars. The deadliest job in the galaxy is open once more. A task so insurmountable, so lethal, that no warrior, no fleet, no genius has ever returned from it. Any species foolish enough to try will face the impossible, will suffer the inevitable. And when they fail, as they always do, their spirit shall be broken, their people reminded of the futility of resistance. The Empire remains unchallenged. The galaxy remains under our control. It was the kind of challenge that sent a ripple of unease through even the most battle-hardened civilizations. Every empire, every coalition, every warlord who had ever attempted it had fallen in disgrace. And that was the point. The challenge was not meant to be won. It was a spectacle, a carefully constructed humiliation ritual designed to remind the lesser races of their place. For centuries, the galaxy had understood this truth. The Empire did not play fair. But humans? Humans had a different relationship with impossible odds. The bar was called the Rusted Fong, a dimly lit dive crammed between a weapons depot and a repair yard on the fringes of a backwater moon. The kind of place that smelled of engine grease, bad decisions, and desperation. It was here, under the flickering neon glow of a half-functional sign, that General Victoria Vic Reynolds was currently elbow-deep in a fight with a 7-foot insectoid mercenary. The bug had started it. Vic was just finishing it. A heavy fist swung toward her, razor-sharp mandibles clicking in frustration. She ducked, pivoted, and drove her elbow into the bastard's thorax. The exoskeleton cracked beneath the impact, and the alien let out a strangled hiss, doubling over. Vic straightened, rolling her shoulders as she grabbed a glass of whiskey from the nearest table and took a slow, deliberate sip. "You know," she said conversationally, "for a species with 8 limbs, you're really bad at using them." A chorus of raucous laughter erupted around the bar. The insectoid groaned, trying to recover, but Vic didn't give it the chance. She grabbed its nearest arm, twisted hard, and sent it sprawling over the table with a crash. "Pay your damn tab next time," she advised, before turning back to her drink. A grizzled reptilian barkeep eyed her warily from behind the counter. "Reynolds," he rumbled, "I got 3 rules in this bar. No weapons, no unpaid debts, and no breaking the furniture." Vic took another sip. "Furniture's still intact." The barkeep glared pointedly at the wreckage of the table. "Fine," she muttered, tossing a handful of credits onto the counter. "Consider it a repair fund." The holoscreen behind the bar flickered, and suddenly, the Empire's challenge was on display. A hush fell over the bar. Even the toughest mercenaries, bounty hunters, and ex-soldiers present knew better than to joke about it. The challenge was a graveyard, a black hole that swallowed all who entered. The kind of mission designed not just to kill, but to erase all hope of resistance. Vic watched, her expression unreadable, as the Emperor's smug face filled the screen. He was an oily-looking bastard, draped in the kind of ceremonial armor that had never seen an actual battlefield. His voice oozed superiority as he declared, once again, that no species could ever overcome the Empire's greatest test. And then, almost as an afterthought, he chuckled. "But if any among you still believe yourselves worthy," he said, smirking, "then step forward. Accept the challenge. Show us your bravery." The bar remained silent. Everyone knew the challenge was unwinnable. There was no prize for trying, only a slow, inevitable demise. It had been attempted by the best strategists, the most advanced AI, and the fiercest warriors in the known galaxy. None had ever returned. Vic took another sip of whiskey. Then, without hesitation, she slammed the glass down, straightened, and said, "All right, I'll do it." The bar erupted into chaos. Shouts of disbelief, laughter, and horror overlapped as patrons turned to stare. Someone choked on their drink. The barkeep dropped a glass. A 3-eyed amphibian in the corner started praying to whatever gods he believed in. "You're joking," someone blurted. Vic raised an eyebrow. Do I look like I'm joking? The reptilian barkeep's scales darkened in distress. Reynolds, I know you got a death wish, but this is suicide. That's what they said about jumping into Fargatha's war pit during the siege of Delta Prime, Vic replied, grabbing a napkin and scribbling something on it. And what happened? You survived. Damn right I did. A scarred Rodian mercenary leaned forward. Look, lady, you're tough. We all know that. But this is different. You go in there, and you don't come out. Vic grinned. We'll see. The moment she submitted her application, the response was immediate. The Empire accepted, of course. No species had dared step forward in over a decade. They were eager, hungry for a new failure, a new lesson in futility. A formal Imperial emissary arrived within hours, flanked by 2 towering Praetorian guards, each standing a full foot taller than Vic. The emissary was a thin, insectoid bureaucrat named K.R.Zit, whose primary job, it seemed, was to look down his nose at anything not wearing Imperial colors. He was not prepared for her. You, he said, incredulously. A single human is accepting the most dangerous mission in existence. That's what I said, yeah, Vic replied, stretching lazily. You got a hearing problem, Bugsy? Karxit's mandibles twitched. I simply mean to say others have tried. Entire fleets have tried. What makes you think you, one human, could possibly succeed? Vic leaned forward, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Because, she said, I'm not here to die. I'm here to win. The silence that followed was thick enough to chew. Karxit's expression flickered through several emotions: disbelief, irritation, mild panic. He had expected desperation. He had expected bravado. What he hadn't expected was certainty. The mission parameters will be sent to you immediately, he said stiffly, trying to regain his composure. Your acceptance of this challenge is binding. The Empire is not responsible for any unfortunate outcomes. Oh, I'd be more worried about yours, Vic said cheerfully. See you on the battlefield, Bugsy. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving the bar in stunned silence. Someone whistled low. Holy sheet, the Rodian muttered. She's actually going to do it. The barkeep exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. Either that woman's the bravest soul in the galaxy, or she's finally lost what's left of her mind. Vic tossed back the rest of her whiskey, cracked her knuckles, and grinned. She said, bit of both. And just like that, the impossible had begun. The journey to the starting point of the challenge was uneventful, if only because no one expected Victoria Reynolds to last more than a few minutes once it actually began. The Imperial fleet transported her in a containment pod, standard protocol really. It wasn't about keeping her comfortable. It was about efficiency. No need to waste precious resources on a dead woman walking. K.R.Zit, the Imperial bureaucrat assigned to oversee her inevitable demise, observed her from the security monitors as she lounged inside the transport, boots propped up, casually flipping through an old-fashioned paper book. The insectoid found himself clicking his mandibles in irritation. You do realize you are about to face certain death, yes? He asked, his voice filtering through the ship's comm system. Vic didn't look up. Uh-huh. And you are reading? She turned a page. Yup. K.R.Zit twitched. He had seen warriors meditate before battle. He had seen champions pray. He had seen soldiers weep, drink, or engage in desperate acts of indulgence, knowing their end was near. But this human? She was acting as if she was waiting for a damn bus. I fail to understand, he pressed. What possible preparation does this offer you? Vic finally glanced up, raising an eyebrow. You ever heard of the art of war? K.R.Zit hesitated. Of course. The ancient tactical manuscript. But that. Not this one. The Art of War for Dummies, she said, flashing the bright yellow cover. I found it in a thrift shop before I shipped out. Some real gems in here. The comms were silent for a long moment. Then, finally, you mock this process. Nah, Vic said, stretching lazily. Just making sure I don't get bored. The transport shuddered as it exited hyperspace. The challenge loomed ahead, an artificial construct the size of a small moon, hovering in the black void. It was a twisted labyrinth of jagged metal, shifting energy barriers, and gravity wells designed to disorient, trap, and eliminate any fool who entered. It had no official name, no grand title. It didn't need one. The Empire simply called it the Gauntlet. From the safety of their observation deck, the Empire's highest officials gathered to watch. The challenge would be broadcast across the galaxy, as it always was. Billions would witness humanity's attempt, and in a matter of minutes, the Empire would have yet another tragic failure to add to its collection. They activated the countdown. 3. Vic stood, rolling her shoulders. 2. She cracked her neck, checking the fastenings on her gear. 1. The doors of the containment pod blasted open, and she leapt. The first hazard was immediate. An intense gravitational shift pulled her downward at impossible speeds, aiming to smash her against the jagged spires of metal below. Previous challengers had either burned up on entry or splattered like insects against a windshield. Vic did neither. Instead, she twisted midair, calculating the descent with practiced ease. She yanked a cord from her belt, deploying a crude, but effective, parachute. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't elegant. But it slowed her just enough to allow her to land on her feet. The Imperial officials, watching, did a double take. She didn't die, one of them murmured. No matter, another scoffed. The maw of despair will finish her soon enough. Ah yes, the maw of despair. A massive, shifting labyrinth of swirling wormholes and unpredictable gravity wells. No one had ever navigated it successfully. It was a trap designed not just to kill, but to humiliate. Vic took one look at the nightmarish vortex and pulled out a paper map. Karzit, watching from a control room, nearly suffered an aneurysm. That is a map? Yup, Vic said, unfolding it. Got it from an old star cartographer on New Berlin. Turns out, this place ain't as unpredictable as you think. See, you guys rely too much on AI simulations. But gravity? Gravity's old school. It follows patterns. And guess what? Karzit hesitated. What? I'm really good at patterns. She adjusted her footing, timed her movements, and jumped. The maw was chaos incarnate, a twisting cyclone of black holes and wormholes collapsing in on themselves. But Vic? She moved with purpose. She used the gravitational pulls to slingshot herself through the void, dodging deadly vortices with uncanny precision. She wasn't fighting physics. She was using it. When she landed safely on the other side, the Emperor himself stood from his throne, watching in stunned disbelief. She's still alive, he muttered. The next phase activated. The bio-hellscape was one of the most infamous sections of the Gauntlet. It was an artificially cultivated jungle designed to kill anything that breathed. The plants were carnivorous. The wildlife was engineered to hunt. The atmosphere itself was filled with spores that would break down organic material in minutes. Vic strolled in, took one deep breath, and immediately put on a respirator. Karzit blinked. That's cheating. Vic shrugged. Nah, it's common sense. The jungle came alive around her. Creatures with too many eyes and too many teeth slithered through the underbrush. The trees themselves seemed to shift, their branches curling like skeletal fingers. The air was thick with the scent of decay. Vic reached into her pack and pulled out a flamethrower. The jungle did not appreciate that. Fire tore through the vegetation, reducing centuries of imperial biological engineering to ash. The creatures shrieked and fled. The carnivorous vines recoiled. By the time Vic was finished, she stood in the center of a smoldering wasteland. The observation deck was dead silent. This is the most disrespectful thing I have ever witnessed, one official whispered. She cannot continue to win, another snarled. The death labyrinth will. The feed flickered. The death labyrinth, a massive cybernetic maze controlled by an ever-adapting AI, was currently playing music. Specifically, it was playing MC Hammer's You Can't Touch This. The Empire's most advanced security system had been hacked. By Vic. The AI's robotic sentinels, designed to eliminate anything that moved, were dancing. Karzit was losing his mind. How? How did you? Vic, standing at the heart of the chaos, shrugged. Ever heard of turning it off and on again? The death labyrinth had been meant to be unbeatable. But in the end, its programming had been just another system. And humans? Humans broke systems. She strolled through the exit, untouched. The Emperor stared at the feed, his face a mixture of horror and rage. He turned to his advisors, voice dangerously low. "Send the fleet," he ordered. "End this." It was not part of the original plan. The gauntlet was meant to be the executioner. But Vic Reynolds had turned it into a joke. The Empire could not allow that. A fleet of warships emerged from the void, descending upon the gauntlet like a hammer. They would bombard her position, erase her from existence, before she could make a mockery of the challenge any further. But Vic was already in the air. She had hijacked a fighter, manually piloting it, something Imperial fleets rarely practiced anymore. Their reliance on AI left them vulnerable to something as simple as human intuition. She weaved through their ranks with terrifying efficiency, dodging plasma fire and returning it in kind. She wasn't just escaping. She was winning. In a final devastating maneuver, she turned the Empire's own fire against them, using their tracking systems to redirect missiles back toward their senders. Explosions rocked the battlefield. By the time the dust settled, Victoria Reynolds had vanished. The Emperor stood in silent fury. "She is still out there," he murmured. Karzit swallowed hard. "Yes, and I fear, my lord, that she is not finished." The Imperial High Command had never known true fear. Arrogance, yes. Confidence, certainly. But fear? That was an emotion reserved for the lesser species of the galaxy. The ones who had tried and failed. The ones who had dared to believe they could rise above their station. The Empire was built on the foundation of their failures, and for centuries, that foundation had never been shaken. Until now. The challenge was never meant to be won. It was a message, a slow, grinding inevitability that reduced every so-called contender to dust. The moment a species accepted the offer, they had already lost. It was an unspoken truth, a tradition carved into the fabric of galactic history. But now, something had gone terribly, inexplicably wrong. General Victoria Reynolds had not only survived every stage of the gauntlet, she had turned it into a spectacle. She had reduced the Empire's most advanced security measures to smoldering ruins, humiliated their AI systems, mocked the very premise of their unbeatable challenge. And most egregiously of all, she was still alive. The Emperor sat rigid on his throne, his golden ceremonial armor gleaming under the cold glow of the war room's holoscreens. Around him, a sea of his highest-ranking officers and advisors whispered in hushed, frantic tones, their carefully maintained composure slipping away with every new report. She hacked the death labyrinth. She reprogrammed the sentinels, made them dance. She burned the bio-hellscape to the ground. She escaped the fleet. It was not supposed to be possible. It was not possible. And yet, Karzit stood at the edge of the room, a growing sense of dread clawing at his exoskeletal spine. He had never believed that the human had any real chance of succeeding. He had wanted her to fail. But now he was beginning to understand something he should have grasped far earlier. The challenge wasn't breaking her. She was breaking the challenge. A deep, simmering silence filled the chamber as the Emperor exhaled slowly, pressing his fingers together. "Tell me," he said, voice dangerously quiet, "where is she now?" A lower-ranked officer hesitated before speaking. "We do not know, Your Majesty." A pause. A long one. The kind that made everyone in the room instinctively straighten, as if preparing for execution. "You do not know," the Emperor repeated, his tone a knife's edge. The officer swallowed hard. "We lost her signal. The last confirmed sighting was during the fleet engagement, but after the incident, our tracking systems were compromised." The Emperor turned, slowly, deliberately. "Compromised?" Another voice, desperate to redirect the conversation, spoke up. "Sire, we believe she may have sabotaged the tracking software." "It was." "She was flying a single fighter," the Emperor interrupted, his patience fraying. "An obsolete model at that. And you are telling me that she alone outmaneuvered an entire war fleet and vanished without a trace." Silence. Then, finally, Karzit stepped forward, his mandibles clicking anxiously. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "I do not believe we are facing an ordinary combatant." The Emperor turned to him, eyes narrowing. "Enlighten me." Karzit hesitated. He had spent years studying military campaigns, analyzing tactics, deconstructing war strategies across countless species. There had always been patterns, logical approaches, calculated risks. But humans? They were something else. Human warfare is unpredictable, he admitted, choosing his words with precision. They thrive on chaos. Where most species would falter without structure, humans adapt. When faced with an unwinnable situation, they do not surrender. They make it worse. The room was deathly still. The Emperor regarded him with unreadable eyes. "And you believe this Reynolds woman is capable of what?" "Single-handedly dismantling the credibility of our greatest tradition." Karzit hesitated again, then begrudgingly, "Yes." A ripple of unease passed through the gathered officers. The Emperor exhaled, standing from his throne with slow, measured grace. "Then we shall make an example of her." Another officer stepped forward, nodding sharply. "Our agents are already searching the outer rim sectors. We will find her." "No," the Emperor said. "She has made a spectacle of us. We will return the favor." The officers exchanged wary glances. "Sire." The Emperor turned toward the holoscreens, his expression hardening into something lethal. "Prepare a broadcast," he ordered. "I will speak to the galaxy myself." Karzit stiffened. The implications of such a move were clear. The challenge had always been a controlled performance, an exercise in power. By addressing the galaxy directly, the Emperor was escalating. But there was no time to question. The preparations were made within minutes. The imperial insignia flared across every major communication hub, overriding civilian broadcasts, demanding attention. Billions of beings across thousands of worlds turned their eyes toward the screen, watching as the Emperor's regal form came into view. "My loyal subjects," he began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "and to those beyond our glorious reach." The silence was absolute. A human has taken a challenge. The words hung in the air, sinking deep into the consciousness of every species watching. "She has survived longer than expected," the Emperor continued, his tone betraying nothing. "But let there be no mistake. This is not a victory. This is heresy, a mockery of the order we have maintained for centuries. And it will not be tolerated." He straightened, eyes narrowing. "To those who may be watching, who may find themselves inspired by this anomaly, let me be clear." The holoscreen shifted, displaying footage of past contenders, broken ships, shattered bodies, lifeless warriors floating in the abyss. "This will be her fate, as it has been for all who came before." The feed cut. For a moment, the Empire breathed easier. The message had been sent. The galaxy would be reminded of its place. But Karzit felt something deeply, profoundly wrong. Because he had spent time with Victoria Reynolds. He had seen her in the flesh, had witnessed her absolute, unwavering certainty. She was not running. She was hunting. And if the Empire thought they could control this situation, they were sorely mistaken. Somewhere, out in the depths of space, a stolen fighter drifted silently in the void, hidden among the wreckage of past battles. Inside, Vic sat with her feet up, munching on an energy bar, watching the Emperor's broadcast with a slow, knowing grin. She wiped a crumb from her lip, exhaled, and muttered to herself, "All right then, let's make this fun." The Imperial Palace stood like a monolith against the endless void, a construct of cold perfection, of towering black stone and gilded arrogance. It had stood unchallenged for centuries, its walls unmarred by war, its halls echoing only with the voices of rulers who believed themselves untouchable. Tonight, those halls were filled with fear. Alarms screamed through the corridors, a shrill cacophony of desperation and disbelief. Soldiers scrambled into defensive positions, their once immaculate ranks now frantic, their weapons trembling in hands that had never truly known war. The very foundations of the Empire shook, not from outside invasion, not from rebellion, but from something much worse, something that defied logic, that had turned their greatest display of power into a cosmic joke. Victoria Reynolds had come to collect. The throne room, vast and hollow, had always felt more like a stage than a place of rulership. The emperor stood at its heart, hands clasped behind his back, his golden armor gleaming under the cold, artificial light. He had spent his entire life commanding power, instilling fear, shaping the galaxy to his will. Now, for the first time in his reign, he felt something foreign curling at the edges of his certainty. Doubt. She should have died. She should have been broken by the maw of despair, devoured by the bio-hellscape, incinerated in the death labyrinth. She should have perished in a spectacular, humiliating fashion. And yet, she had not only survived, she had thrived. The reports had come in like a storm, each one more damning than the last. First, the gauntlet had been reduced to rubble, a once glorious monument to imperial might, now a smoldering wreck of incompetence. Then came the whispers from the outer systems, fleets thrown into disarray, supply lines disrupted, entire sectors refusing to acknowledge imperial broadcasts. She was dismantling them, not with weapons, not with armies, but with sheer, undeniable audacity. And now she was here. The great doors to the throne room slammed open, the reinforced steel groaning under the force. A dozen guards raised their weapons, but it didn't matter. She strolled through like she owned the place, combat boots clicking against the polished obsidian floor, a lazy, lopsided grin stretched across her face. The guards hesitated. They had been trained to expect defiance, to handle warriors and rebels and traitors. But they had never faced someone who walked into the heart of the empire like it was just another bar fight waiting to happen. Vic stopped at the foot of the throne's dais, tilting her head slightly. Nice place. A little gaudy for my taste, but hey, you do you. The emperor did not move. His voice, when it came, was ice. You should not be here. She raised an eyebrow. And yet here I am. The room was stifling in its silence. The air itself felt heavier, charged with the weight of unspoken understanding. The empire had already lost. They had lost the moment they had underestimated her. The emperor had seen entire civilizations kneel before him, had watched the strongest warlords break under the weight of his power. And now, standing before him, was a single human, battle-worn and grinning like she had already won. Because she had. He exhaled, slow and measured. What do you want? Vic rocked back on her heels, considering. You know, I've been thinking about that. She glanced around, gesturing vaguely. I could take your throne, knock you off that fancy chair, rename the place Vic's House of Reasonable Governance, maybe put in a pool. She grinned. But honestly, that sounds exhausting. The emperor narrowed his eyes. Then why are you here? She took a step closer. The guards tensed, but she ignored them. I came, she said, voice casual, to make sure you understand something. A pause. A heartbeat stretched too long. You lost. The words were simple, undeniable. She let them sink in, let them wrap around his certainty and strangle it. You built your entire empire on fear, on the belief that no one could ever challenge you, that no one could ever win. But here's the thing, fear only works until someone calls your bluff. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. And I just did. The emperor's jaw tightened. The galaxy isn't afraid of you anymore, she continued. They're laughing at you. That was the final blow, the one she had been saving. She saw the flicker of something in his gaze, something he would never admit to. Panic. Empires didn't fall in a single battle. They crumbled in whispers, in cracks that spiderwebbed through their foundations, in the moment when their people stopped seeing them as gods and started seeing them as mortal. You will not leave this palace alive, the emperor said, his voice low. Vic smiled. Won a bet. The moment the words left her lips, the power in the room died. Lights flickered out, casting the chamber into cold darkness. The guards shouted in alarm, weapons primed. But Vic didn't move. She had planned for this. Karksit's voice crackled through her hidden earpiece. I have successfully overridden the palace's security systems. You have approximately 4 minutes before backup power is restored. Plenty of time, Vic muttered. She moved before the guards could react, slipping into the shadows, using the chaos to her advantage. Blaster fire lit the darkness in frantic bursts, but she was already 3 steps ahead, ducking, weaving, a ghost among giants. By the time the backup generators kicked in, she was gone. The Emperor stood rigid, fists clenched, staring at the empty space where she had stood. For the first time in his rule, he had no words. The escape was almost too easy. The palace was built to withstand sieges, to repel entire armies. But it had never been designed to handle one determined human who refused to play by the rules. She reached the docks, a stolen Imperial fighter waiting for her. Karz was already inside, mandibles twitching in absolute disbelief. That was insane. That was reckless. That was effective, Vic interrupted, sliding into the pilot's seat. He exhaled in a long, suffering sigh. Yes, that too. She activated the ship's thrusters, the engines roaring to life beneath her fingertips. As they shot into the void, she leaned back, a satisfied grin pulling at the edges of her mouth. Karz eyed her warily. So what now? She stretched, hands behind her head. Dunno. Might grab a drink. See what's playing at the holotheaters. Maybe incite a little more galactic revolution. We'll see where the day takes me. Karz groaned. The Empire would never recover from this. Not fully. Not truly. And as the stars stretched out before them, as the weight of a galaxy on the brink of change settled in the silence, Vic Reynolds let herself smile. It had been a damn good day.